Hello everyone, this is the third time I'm making this video due to technical difficulties such as load shedding. So let me show you what I have here. This is a 2D scene because we're working in 2D this term for second years. And for the third years they're not, fortunately, I guess. But 2D is still fun, it's still great. You can see if I press up and down and left and right, you know, all this button mashing, then we get inputs through the input system. So if I press up, then X is positive, down, well, that's supposed to be Y. Oh, it's the bottom. So up is positive, down is negative, same for X, left is negative, positive. Cool. Then we're running through it, and then we can set it up from scratch. So we have our input actions. Our input actions is where we map our buttons. I call it general, and move, set up for keyboard and the left joystick. Apologies. Which means that if I connect a controller, it'll do the exact same thing. So it's very universal. Cool. So you set this up, right? And then you click on this thing and you say apply, and it creates for us an input match script, which houses all the inputs for this input map, which right now is only one. Sorry if there's background noise. Must be annoying if you can hear it. Alright, and then what we do is we make an input manager. And so remember about sorting your hierarchy. I don't think the second years have heard it because of class issues. It's fine. All good. What you do is you create an empty, you do dash dash dash, and then you call it whatever. It can be environment, for example. Then of course you reset it. And so now if we add, let's say a sprite, so we can go to the object, sprites, just do a square. Then we can add it to the environment. So now everything is sorted, right? We have more sorted. All right. So in our managers, let me just test in our managers. We have the input manager script. Cool. And it looks pretty busy for just one input, right? But the thing is, the only thing that you'll add is more lines of this. So you might have more lines to close that. We'll add more lines for more inputs here. Same thing with your UnityEvents. Actually, that this nothing. I'm gonna delete it. I don't know what that's there. Must have been thinking of something weird. All right, and this is the Unity event. So this is what other scripts will talk to. They will subscribe to it, and this on move is called from here in our move function, and this gets forced into it. The vector 2 of our move inputs, our WSD or joystick, and then this function has a parameter. This parameter gets used everywhere, so it's a generic parameter. You don't like make custom ones. This is just based off the input action. So you have this move function, and then this move function subscribes to our input. And so there's a lot of subscribing going on. We'll talk about what Unity events are or delegates are. Unity event is a Unity-based delegate. It's like a subscription service. An example I gave was Netflix, right? So we can all subscribe to a Netflix account. And then Netflix themselves, you know, theoretically, they have one button. And when they press it, it takes all of our money. So it's kind of similar like that. It's a contract. You subscribe to something. They can press a button and then multiple things get called instead of just one. Like if you call a function once, call that function. If you want to call more functions, I mean, you could probably put multiple in a list. Probably not. Did that before? Sounds weird. Alright, and so where we call this from is not here. This is our manager and other scripts interface with. So one thing you'll realize or notice is that it's static. That means it's accessible from anywhere. So let me show you. So right here, input manager dot onmove dot add listener. It's whatever you add here listens. It waits. It's basically the same thing as subscribing. So it's listening. It's waiting on the command, like a dog on a leash or something, waiting for a command. And then on move will call and shove in its throat vector 2. And so that's what we do here. We make a function. It has a vector2 parameter. And when we put it here in add listener, it can receive that input from it. And so that's why I'm debugging it. It's kind of simple. So what I think I'll do is probably to write it from scratch, which does take a while. But it's all about... okay, no, I'm not going to write it from scratch. This gives you guys a visual example of what's going on. So that's what a Unity event is, and we'll get into why it's powerful at some other point. But let's make a new one, right? So to do that, you can follow along if you really want to. Let's actually set this up, right? So you go to the package manager. It's in Windows Package Manager, right? Mine's already here. You scroll down. Sorry, you go to Unity Registry first, of course. You scroll down once it's loaded, and you go on the input system, and you just say download. Now, once you do that, it's gonna give you a pop-up saying, "Do you want to switch to input system whatever?" Right? Just say no, and what we do is you go to Edit, Project Settings. Sorry if I'm going fast. You can like pause, of course, and then you go to the player. Then we scroll down, and here you can say it says active input handling. It's in the configuration of the player. So by default, it'll be on Input Manager Alt, and that's why it's asking you, please switch to the new one, because it needs it. But we still want to be able to do something like, let's say, I'm just going to do it in awake, which is a weird place to do it. But if input, sorry, my autocorrect doesn't work yet, because I was too busy to fix it. Input dot get key down, key code dot k, fine, and then log. That's completely wrong. Debug dot log. You pressed space. It's not gonna work because it's in awake. Unless I hold the key down, which is a challenge on its own, or like a mini game. If you're bored, I guess. Right, so that's the old way. The new way is using the input system. Right here. So put it on both. It's gonna restart your editor, and that's just to set it up. Don't worry, it's not gonna break things. After that, we finally have access to the new cool stuff. So you can set an input map here, right? What you do is you right click, create, find the input actions. You might have to scroll down. My screen is pretty big, so here in input actions. And once you create it, it'll look something like this. Although it'll be empty. There won't be a general here. So you can make one, and then you can say something like player input, player action, or something like that. Doesn't really matter. And you can see it has a clean slate. This is how it'll look for you. So we set this up so that you at least get an idea. So let's say you want to do for the move input. It's a very common thing that you might want to set up, and that's why I did it here. So you click on this, have any action, and let's maybe call it move. You can call it something like player movement if you really want to. But move is more generic, easy to understand. But it's easy to understand and it's short. So you can use a button, but not for vector2 movement, left, right, forward, backward. To do pass through, and then from button, we switch to vector2. Cool. And then after that, you're not done yet. So delete the binding in here. I'm not going to use it. And now a new thing will pop up when you press the plus, because we added vector2. Set up to vector2. And here we can say add up, down, left, right, composite. That gives us all the 4 bindings set up. Down, left, right. You have to add it. So you can say keyboard here, and just duplicate it, and then call this controller. For the VR peeps, you can duplicate it again and do VR stuff, but we'll cover that in class rather. So don't worry too much about it. All right. So for up, down, left, right on keyboard, it's simple. You just press W for up. Down, you just press the S key. This is pretty simple. Fast. And you press D key for that. For controller, if you have a controller plugged in, you can just click on it and go up, down, left, right, and so on. It will most likely work. My controller's battery is dead. So I'm just going to do it manually. Go to gamepad, scroll down, find left stick, unless you want to do some weird alternate game. So go for the up, we can choose up, for down, down, for left, left, for right, we choose right. And that's it. This is now set up. That's how you set up an input. Cool, right? Very easy. Now, some of you might have gone this far and thought like, it doesn't want to work. This doesn't want to work. I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to delete this one because we already have this move here. Since we already have this move, I'm going to add one more. And I'll get to why it might not work. Just, setting it up here, running the script. Alright, cool. So let's add another action. And we can call this jump. Why not? You can probably say space, right? Space bar. But if you're setting it up for controller and keyboard and whichever else you might have, that doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to say space bar. Cool. And that is for keyboard. It at least highlights it there for us. Here we have to type it. Here you know what it is. And then add a binding. And for this, we are already in the gamepad here. So if you, there it is, just go back to gamepad. And then we need to find the right. Oh, here it is. So button south, the bottom one, which is I think A on an Xbox controller and X on a PS4 or 5 controller. South. Cool. So now if you jump on your keyboard or on your controller, both instances will work. That's the whole point of this. That's why we use input system. You can bold it for console, bold it for desktop. If you're at a game jam and someone's like, hey, can I try your game? I have a controller, plug it in, it just works. That's why we do this. Cool. So now you know how to set this up. You can add more things if you want, less things. You can add like scroll wheel, whatever else you want. Okay, cool. The next thing you might want to do or have to do is this will look like this, right? What you have to do is you have to click on generate sharp class, and then you'll have to apply it. Sorry. All right. Sorry if my mic is too loud, or I haven't even looked that way yet, but it's chill. All right, and what this will do is it'll make this lovely script for us, and this script is a script that houses all the input setups for our input map. Object. Call it object. Cool. So the next step that you'll need to do is, of course, make your managers thing, your empty, for hierarchy reasons. So it's what do you call it? Structured and looks good. I mean, you press Alt and you click on this drop down, it'll like close everything. And if you just like left click on it, it'll all be neat. And it looks way better than having just a bunch of random stuff. That's why I do it. Alright, but then create an input manager empty, and we can create our script. So just, of course, create script. Create C# script. Yeah, I fumbled my words there. Apologies. So yeah, just drag the script on here, and we go in. I wonder if I should start from script. Still a thing. Sure. Why not? Think. Sure. We can start from scratch. Sure. Let's do it. Alright, so what you want to do is you created an input action called input map. So the first thing you need to do is we need to make a variable for it. So you call it input map and just input map. Alright, now we have to initialize it. So we can create our normal functions. Does it work? It does. So let's create awake on enable. And the last one is void on destroy. Cool. Sorry. So what you want to do is, first of all, we have to create it. We have to create a new one to use in this script. So you say input map, the variable, equals new input map. Nice. And now we can initialize it or over initialize it. So your code will be here, your input subscribing. Yes, what happened? So you want to do is you want to say input map dot enable here, the same thing. So I'm just gonna duplicate it. To move it around like that, it's Control-Shift-D. Or like to duplicate it, and to move it around is Control-Shift up arrow and down arrow. So it's just the same shortcut but for D and arrows. Right, let's duplicate this one. And let me show you. So I can press Control-D, selects it. So one thing you can do is you can select like a top one, and now you want to change a lot of variables or things that are similar. It might happen. So an old-fashioned way is to double click on it and double click delete. But a better way is to press Control-D, select this first word, and then you can continue pressing it for the next one and the next one. Very cool. So what I do is I double click or Control-D, delete it, and type disable. Double click works if you're working on your mouse. If you're just on your keyboard with both hands, Control-D. So I'm just gonna do this again. You can also jump left and right with holding Alt. So if you hold Alt, it'll jump words. Right? Really useful. So press Control-D, then type dispose. And this is how you delegates work, or even Unity events. So how it works is, do I have a way to paint? Do I like have paint on here? Be blinded. Okay, this massive white canvas. Alright, so you have your contractor, right? And then you have all your wacky functions, which are all the same shape for some reason. Triangle. These are all your functions that want to subscribe to it. So they form a contract with it. Cool. So they're all forming contracts. That's very cool. So what happens is, let's say they form a contract and this guy gets absolutely hammered or like destroyed. He like doesn't exist anymore. Then those contracts are still there. They don't disappear. And now the references are broken. So you might have weird references. Another thing is it can happen the other way around. So now they made a contract. This game object gets absolutely destroyed. The contract still exists. And so it's trying to call out to all of them or tell them, hey, do this thing. And now this guy, which in our case is, well, it's going to be on move or whatever. Yeah, it's destroyed, and now it's trying to call it. It doesn't exist, and it's going to give us an error. There are ways to mitigate that, but the best way is just to set it up like this. Another thing it does is it handles automatically your delegates or Unity events and also your input. So another thing you can do is if you disable this input somewhere else, then your player won't have input. It won't have controls. So that's one way to relinquish or, well, take away control from the player. But anyway, let's move on. So now we've initialized it. So now let's actually use it. So what you want to do is remember your names you've given in the input map. Don't worry about that right now. So we have general and move, general and jump. What we want to do. Oh, that's the installer. What we want to do is I want to say input map dot generic. In my case, it might be something else for you. Dot move, and then you want to say dot performed. So when it is performed. Please subscribe. So this is when you click the button. You also get dot cancelled. So when you let go of the button. But we're going to do performed. And then you say plus equals. So we're subscribing. We're adding it to the subscribed list. And now we have to actually add something. So let's just call it move. Right? It doesn't exist yet. It's fine. So if we go down here, we can now say void move. And voila, we have a connection here. There's a function and it's being subscribed to this input map, move. But the problem is it's not actually set up. So let's actually go back and you'll see an error. What this is complaining about. Oh, this doesn't exist yet. Just gonna delete it for now. Ignore that. We'll do that now. It's soon, yeah. So this is saying input does not contain a definition for generic, and no extension method generic accepting a first argument of input map could be found. Blah blah blah. I'm not sure why it's saying that. It's line 18, 14. It's just complaining about this. So what we have to do is give it something here. How do I explain this? So the input we set up is not just the button. So it's not just when it performs, it's doing something. That would be like with jump. But this has a vector2 element to it. It has to send information through from the input to wherever it needs to end up at. So what we need to do is we have to say input action dot call back context. And we can just call that the parameter ctx. And now it should not give the error. If it does, I would be, whoa, that's a really strange error. Let's see what's happening here. Input map is new. It doesn't have a generic. See what's happening. That's my fault. It's called just general. It's not that hard. Okay, but it would have given an error anyway. Let's see. General. I was onto something and it led to nowhere, but it's fine. All good. There, it's solved. So the question is, if I remove this, will it then give an error? Yes, there it goes. No overload for move matches delegate action input action callback context. So you see it gives you what it needs here. Just read the log. And it's line 14 right here. It's saying this, it wants something. I'm just gonna put it back. And now, as you saw before, the error is gone. We have the parameter now that it wants. You have to use it. Alright, well, if it needs it, of course. In this case, it needs a vector2. So what we can do now is we can create our Unity event. That, I guess. So let's go public static Unity event. I just realized that I had to explain something beforehand because you guys might be like, it's not working, all error. And I'll get to it now. So public static Unity event. We're now making our own delegate, but it's a version that is made by Unity. And we cannot just make any old Unity event. We need to have a parameter of type vector2. We need to do it that way. Now we can give it a name. And the convention is to do on something. So on something called, on move, on jumped, on UI updated, stuff like that. So on move, makes sense, equals new. So it's similar to here, new input map. And this is a constructor. This is a class, input map that we made, or that was made it for us. And doing this, you basically make a new one to use in our script. And just like that, we're saying this Unity event class that Unity made, we want to make a new one for ourselves. And sometimes it needs variable. So sometimes you would actually like say here float x is 0, stuff like that. For now, we don't need to do that. So, but we do need the Unity event vector 2. That's a parameter. It's asking from us, or for us, asking us. Vector 2, and then they just end it bracket like that. Cool. So now we can take this on move. The on move dot invoke, and since on move requires a vector 2 to be passed through, we can pass it through here. So we say ctx dot read value. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be uppercase. Read value. So we'll figure it out. Vector 2. Cool. Oof. No, it's supposed to be uppercase. Okay, cool. So we're accessing the read value function of the ctx parameter, and we're asking for vector 2. So you can basically do this with any input, but if the input doesn't give a vector 2, it's just not going to return anything. Alright, now let's go back and see if we have any errors. We might not. We'll see. No errors. So far, so good. Very cool. Alright. So I already explained that static makes it so this can be seen anywhere. So we'll go over like script referencing at some. Well, I would like to cover it now, but this video is actually it's not that long. Okay, let me do this, and then I'll do script reference slightly, just a little bit, like a small introduction to it. And that's because I know that the way you guys usually reference something from a different script is that you make you put, like, let's say you have other script like this one called test script. Let me open it up. And in here, or let's say here we have a public float x, just to make it generic. And we can say its default value is 3. And then from here, what we can do is we can say public test script, right? And now what we can do is we can say test script on some on enable. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, let's just start. Thank goodness that all corrects. So test script dot x. We can actually log it. Test script x float equals script. Well, it's supposed to be variable. Type it like that. Equals that. Test script x equals float. So of course now we have to drag it in. We have it right here. It's 3. And if we go to input manager, we can now drag that script in, and now it's going to debug. Hopefully, most probably, most likely, maybe. There we go. Equals test. Because I'm debugging the wrong thing. Of course, it's supposed to be .x. I can't believe I did that. Alright, is 3. There we go. And by the way, that's a way you can log without doing like the whole plus thing. Otherwise, you would have to say test script equals float equals, and then plus, and then like add space or whatever, and then you add this here. But this is just to do it much easier. $, and then anywhere. I mean, I can do this to input map or whatever, or another variable. Alright, so that's, I assume, usually how you guys would do script referencing. So we'll touch on that after this. I just wanted to let you guys know. So let's continue with the input though. I got sidetracked there. So it's static And it's a Unity event, as I explained, that passes through vector2. So now let's actually use it, because right now it doesn't really do anything. In a test script, remove this old guy. What we can do is we have to subscribe to it, right? I've been talking about subscribing so much already. So in here we say plus equals move, but it looks slightly different for Unity events. So in here we have to once again create on enable. So let's say on enable. And then we can say input manager dot on move dot add listener ID. Now let's duplicate it and do Control D again and say remove listener. And that's what I talked about. You subscribing, and you have to say remove listener, so the contract breaks when you stop playing the game or when you disable the script. Alright, and so now we also have to give it a function. So we could just call it move again, it doesn't matter. It's a different script, so it doesn't know about it from here. Give it, we can put it in, but it's gonna give us an error, once again, because it says this Unity action is calling for a vector2. So let's give it. This time we don't have to do input actions dot callback context. We can just do vector2 and then do like, and you'll see there's an error once it loads. Here we go. Cool. No error. And now we're at the stage at the start of the video. We can log. Maybe we should do the one with the $sign. I could say input equals this. Ready. So I'll map the jump, because why not? And then I'll show you guys how to do script referencing at a higher level, something more advanced. But I think I'll first show you guys the simple method so that you guys can get. Otherwise, if I show you all the cool stuff, brain will explode probably. So yeah, we're back at where we were. You see, input's working, and if you add a controller, it'll work as well. Very exciting. I'm happy I could actually get to this stage without power cutting. Alright, so this is how it looks. It's very simple. It just grows as you continue to code. So now let's do the other one, the jump. So input map dot general dot jump dot performed plus equals jump. And this one, as far as I know, you don't need the action callback because it doesn't need a vector2. So you can say void jump. And then you can just say, oh, if you need to make a new one of these. I'm gonna type it out. Sorry, that's my mom. Let me do this focus thing. Public static Unity event. We don't need any parameters. We can call it on jump. You see, it makes sense. Unity event. It's way shorter. Cool. So one thing I forgot to mention, and by now you've probably already recognized it, hopefully. Alert, you're asleep. We have more than just these three using statements. We also have UnityEngine.events, and that is how we access UnityEvent. And we also have UnityEngine.inputSystem, and that is how we have access to input actions and, you know, input in general. So apologies if you've gotten this far and it's just errors and you're just like, this. You know, I should have said at the start. But I mean, I thought you would probably see this before. But it's fine. It's all good. Cool. So on jump. Now let's set it up. So we can say on jump dot invoke. And I think that should be it. So it might complain because it doesn't have that. Yes, it is complaining that it doesn't have the callback context. See right there. So let's just put it in. It's fine. Input action dot callback context. So just because a parameter is here doesn't mean you need to use it. Why is it not orange? That's freaky. Because I typed it in the wrong place. If you noticed before I did, then good, I guess. Alright, you don't need to use it. It's just you have to put it there because that's how a delegate works. Pass a parameter through, waiter2, and you want to subscribe to it, like right here, move, you have to put a parameter there. If you remove it, it doesn't work. That's just how it is. And so it should work now. Alrighty. So one thing you have to remember is that with jumping, you usually need to know when you let go of the button as well. Yeah, not always, but it depends on how you code it. In this case, it's gonna whichever is subscribed to on jump, this Unity event. So we can probably do it over here. So let's do, I'm just gonna duplicate it for time saving. So on jump for this one, and you have to remove it as well. And we can say void jump. So this setup here, this is script for continue. You would put in your player script, or you would put it in some form of manager if you want to control certain elements, like UI elements, certain scenes. And that's where you would put this. If you're curious, you wouldn't just put it in a test script and hope for the best and reference it to somewhere else, because that would be like a weird middleman. So now we can put jump slot, and what we can do is log it so you guys can see what's happening. So log and just say jumped for now, right? Because it didn't autocorrect. That's fun. Alrighty. So now if you press jump, it should work. Keep the step. It does work. So if I press down, there it is. And I'm holding it in right now. Let go, nothing happens. So this might be fine for you, right? You might just want it to call something like this. And I mean, you could probably just put your jump code in here, right? So you can do like an example would be rb.add force, and then your force. Got how this works. Is it? I think it's first your force value. So let's say 5, and then the second one would probably be direction. So transform.up, and then your last one would be like force mode.impulse, right? Like that. So you could probably do it here, because when you press jump, it jumps. And then you'd probably have like just gonna do a mock-up stuff. So physics, this would be just this should be in fixed update, of course. So physics, or if physics dot check sphere, so you spell it, and then this would be like transform dot position, and then the scale, the ratio, the scale, yeah, 0.25 f, something like that. And then you would have like a layer, whatever that layer is, your layer mask. So if this runs, do something. Okay, if this runs, what would you do? So I guess that should just be a bool. So you could probably just make a bool and then say bool equals that, whatever. Right, I'm not actually writing the code, I'm just showing you an example. So you could say bool, whatever your bool is equal to that, and if that bool is true, then it can jump. So like this is one way to set it up, if that's what you want to do. A different way to set it up that I usually do, because I want to know when the player also let go of the button. Maybe you want to perform a high jump, right? So the way you would do that is you would call it unperformed and uncancelled. So scrubbing the same function to both the performed and cancelled input. Yes. And then what you can do in here is, instead of calling it like this, just cut it. You can say if ctx.performed, then jump on jump. And then you could probably, for on jump, have a parameter. So maybe a bool. Do it on both. That's the wrong place to do it. Oopsie. I guess you don't need this anymore then. So ctx.performed. And now what we can do is have a bool here. Just be like jumped. And then, alright. So jumped question mark? Just do pressed. I hope this works. Yes. Okay, let me just Google it. If you're ever stuck, just Google it. Input you're wondering, this is what I'm looking at. Otherwise it's just awkward silence. So performed, cancelled, this is spelled wrong. Okay, let me just do this for now. It might not work because let's see. It's only true. That's because we do need that. I don't know why it is freaking out. Cancel. Let me bring it back. Action sold. Very bright. So it explains you're not enable. Oh, it's I think it's only with one L. If it's true, it's kind of annoying. It is just one L. Okay, that was user error. You learn, love and learn. So if I press it, it's true. If I let go, it's false. You see? So what I do is, instead of setting up the input in the player script, I set it up here, because then you can make the code pretty complex. This can be like 10 lines of code, and then what it outputs on this side can be whichever and whatever you want. So that's pretty cool. So let me show you one last thing. All right, and that is referencing. So one thing you can do, right? This is static, which means that it is accessible everywhere. So you see, we didn't need an editor reference here at all. This is just straight up calling input manager.onMove. And that's because onMove and onJump is static. So they are seen everywhere. There's one drawback to that though, and that is if you want this script to live on, for example, an enemy script. So a script that will have multiple instances in the scene, then it won't work. This only works on something that it has one instance. So the player, if it's a single player game, your input manager or UI manager or game manager, there's only one of them. Or other scripts, there are only one of. But as soon as it's like an enemy script, then it doesn't work. So let me bring up Paint again and then explain why that's the case. So the thing is, if you don't code a structure or a hierarchy, then you might want to reference everything. So you have like enemies, your player, then your manager scripts, and then like other random scripts like your lighting and stuff like that, whichever was processing, accessing scripts. So if you just code randomly, then you might be like, oh dang, this like, I kind of want this between enemies, and I kind of want the player to that. I want the player, them to reference the player, and this manager needs to talk to this guy, but this guy needs to talk to this manager. Like if you just like this is basically spaghetti code, and that's why if you're given power like this, right, the static reference, then you're gonna abuse it and then cry when it doesn't work. So what you need to do is shift to a hierarchy-based thinking. So that would be there's one thing at the top, or two, whatever, and that would be like a game manager, a UI manager, your input manager, and they trickle down and talk in one direction down. They can talk back in some instances, some cases, but yeah. So your game manager would talk to, for example, so your player might be another thing that's only one of, right? So they might converse with each other to figure out what is going on, what are we supposed to do, and stuff like that. And then you might have your enemy scripts. Well, I guess that I'm doing the circles wrong. Don't focus on this. You might have your enemy scripts. This trickles down. It tells them, hey, you guys have to do this. This is the thing that's happening now. Then they have their own built-in logic for patrolling attack, and it's called state machines. You know, this state, then thing happens, then this state, then thing happens, then this state, or it might go back to this state, right? So they have their own independent thing going on, but they don't talk back to something else like like the game manager, for example. The game manager talks to them. It sets them up. It instantiates them. It gives them the information. It gives them a reference to the player, stuff like that. But they don't. They cannot have static on them because it breaks. So an example of that is in third year. I made, which is a couple years ago. We made a game where there are taxis. So there would be a taxi here, street. Then far away this side, there will be a different street, right, with like a junction. Then the taxi would be parked there. And so we wanted it to teleport between the two, right? And the issue is we discovered static referencing. So we were like, hey, that's cool. This guy can reference this guy. This guy can reference this guy. And the player can reference them. And they can reference the player. And then they talk to each other. So what we did was you jumped into the taxi. We're like, in the taxi. You have a cool cutscene where like we're driving in the taxi and it's fun and stuff. It gets there. You're like, hey, it works, man. And then you jump into this taxi and then you're back in this taxi and you're driving there. Like, what? And that's because this taxi here first got initialized. It's now the main taxi. Like the other one kind of doesn't exist. They're like the same thing in a static world. So it took long to explain, and there's no color here, so it's boring. Don't worry about it. All right. So that's the dangers of static referencing. Don't just put it everywhere. Put it on your game manager or whatever first. And I'll show you different ways of referencing some other point that are powerful and cool and makes development so much easier. But yeah, so to use this, not just in a variable like this, we can actually make the whole script static. So to do that, you type public, then your script name, then you give it a name, which is by convention instance. Then what you do is, it should be the first thing in your awake. Awake runs before everything else, always. Before on enable, before start, before your own custom stuff. So you put here instance equals this. Now this class is static, and that's fine because it's a manager. There's one of them, and it talks to other things, and other things can find info from it. It's like the dad you've always wanted. All right. So now what we can do, let's see. Let's change this up a bit. So these both will now just be normal plebeian stuff. Actually, let's make them public. They kind of need to be public still. Otherwise, they're not accessible. So if you go to test script, actually, let's just go out. You'll see it breaks. It's like An object reference is required for the non-static field, method, or property. It's not static. So how, like, you don't know if there's multiple of these input manager scripts, which one is it referencing? Which one? That's why static makes it, you know, a singleton, an individual, its own personality, a snowflake. You can put it that way, I guess. So now how do you reference it, right? Well, we've made it static with this variable. So copy this variable, and I can say input manager dot instance dot on move. So it's referencing it to this instance. This instance is now that singular thing that encapsulates this manager. So let's do it for both. Dot instance dot on jump. I forgot about the other two. Not working. That is. Did I save? Save. That's embarrassing. Public. Here. Oh. Got something. So I did make it an input manager reference, but I forgot to make it static. That is, of course, the backbone of this whole, like the whole reason I'm doing it. So now it's static. Public static input manager. Apologies. Now it's thinking, and there we go. And now we should be able to just, you know, doesn't work, damn it. Okay, but it does work in theory. It's just there's something else that it doesn't like. It doesn't like our faces, I guess. Let's see what can be the problem. I think I ran into this issue before as well. It is subscribed to, oh, it's called from here. Because it's trying to subscribe to it. Okay, it might not like that with UnityEvents. I'm gonna make them static again. And just to end up the video so that it's not, you know, not satisfying, I'm gonna use a different example. So let's make a function. This can just be, where should we make this? Let's do it on this side. It can be a public void change int, add int. Cool. So whenever this is called, it like changes something. So let's just make an int at the top. Int count, which will be 0 by default. And then here we can say count plus plus, which will count plus add up once whenever it's called. And then it will log out. So this is not something you like where you will want to put this, of course, because this is a manager script, but just for now. So let's just put it in here. So we actually do it like this. Count equals this. Cool. And so now let's try to call this whenever we press the jump button. So if jumped is true, so if you didn't know, if it's just as is, jumped is true. If you put an exclamation mark, it's false. It's just a shorter way of coding. So now we can say input manager dot instance dot add int, and it should just work. Apologies, that part. I don't think UnityEvents like it when you call through an instance. Hopefully this works. If it doesn't, I'll just, you know. It worked. Alright, count is 1. Count is 2. Count is 3. Count is 4. Count is 5. Sorry if that's super loud, but I can just do this and count up. It feels like that cookie click game now. I have to click the cookie. Alright, cool. So the Unity event thing, I don't think it's a good example with static reference, really, because it doesn't really like it when you do that. And I don't exactly know why it is, but it is like a Unity thing. But you can see we made it static, our class. We set instances this in a wake, so it's the first thing that happens. And then we made a function on this side, on the input manager, that counts up and logs it for us. And it's public, of course. And then in the test script, we're calling it. We're saying input manager.instance.addInt. We're calling the function from here without any editor reference. It's just input manager.instance.call the function. And this works as normal. Of course, I'm gonna show you, but if you had like, it was an int, I mean, I can probably show it. We'll just return this. There's two T's for some reason. Return count plus plus, and then we could probably like do this, and then we could put it here, and then ready. I want to remove this. That's annoying. So now what we're doing is we're returning it as an int. We're giving it the count plus plus. We're calling it, and that function now becomes the value it returns. And so we can use it that way. I hope this video is informative and stuff. It counts up every time I press space. Cool. Another thing we can do is we can add an int here, and then we can just say add value. So the amount it should add by. And so then we can say plus equals add value, right? And so on this side, it would usually have an error, but we don't have that now. So let's make this like 5, or like we've leveled up, so it's 399. And now we're passing through an integer, and we're saying add that, and then we're returning which is the added up value over here, and then logging it out. And this is very, like, this is a lot in one video, but I think it gives a lot of things for the semester, so, because we're going to use all of this a lot. That is functions that has return type, a parameter to pass through, Unity events that are static or non-static, the input system, and instance referencing or static referencing. There's an easier way to do this though, the static, but it will be too much to show that now. Alright, so now every time you press space, it should add up 399. It should be cool. Let's see what happens. Here we go. And that's it. That's the video for the class. I'll see you guys next week. Like some point. I think the second years is Friday now, and the third years are Wednesday. And I'm sending this video out to the second years and the third years because you all need to know this. Please know this. Yeah, cool. Alrighty. And I can probably show more things, but I think I'll show that in class. Alright, cool. Hope you guys learned something, and just go back every time you want to set this up. Visual Studio Code, I'll make a separate video at some point for how to install everything. I figured out how to fix it, but for now, I'm not going to do it now. So enjoy the weekend. Alright, bye-bye.